Hi, I'm Katie Von Holzen, IASCL's media coordinator. I have with me today Dr. Annick De Houwer, Emeritus Professor at the University of Erfurt in Germany. She earned her master's degree in General and English Linguistics from the University of Antwerp and completed a postgraduate certificate in psycholinguistics during a year in Leuven, followed by a graduate year at Stanford as a Fulbright Scholar. She then completed her PhD in linguistics at the Free University of Brussels. Her work concentrates on language acquisition, and although she is best known for her work on bilingual language acquisition, she has also worked extensively on monolingual acquisition, especially in Dutch, co-editing the book The Acquisition of Dutch with Stephen Gillis. In her work on bilingual language acquisition, she has focused on bilingual families' well-being and on the role of input in bilingual acquisition, both aspects that overlap with her work as initiator and director of the Harmonious Bilingualism Network, or HaBilNet. She has written influential books and textbooks, including Bilingual First Language Acquisition and more recently, Bilingual Development in Childhood. She has been a member of the IASCL since 1987, serving twice on the IASCL Executive Committee and as a chair on the Grant Committee and co-chair of the Publications Committee. The TLAR book series, so that stands for Trends in Language Acquisition Research, which was originally an official IASCL publication, was initiated by Annick and Stephen Gillis, and she served as both a general editor and a member of the editorial board. She also served as IASCL treasurer and just finished her tenure as the association's president between 2021 and 2024. She's also served and continues to serve as my direct contact and supervisor in my capacity as IASCL's media coordinator. We've worked together now for a little over 2 years. It was her idea to develop these video interviews with child language researchers, so I think it's very fitting that she's joining me today. Annick, it's a pleasure to be talking with you today. Welcome. Um, I'd like to start at the beginning, like I usually do in these interviews. So you've previously said that as a 16-year-old, you realized that you could speak 2 languages. What a wonderful thing to realize. But you didn't really know how that had come to be. So I'd like you to describe your early experiences with language, I guess in your case, bilingual experience, and how that informed maybe your choices to study language development and especially to study bilingual language development.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you very much for having me and inviting me for this um, interview. I'm very pleased. And of course, it's been wonderful to work with you for all this time. And I'm very happy that it continues for now, at least. So, yeah, your question. Yes, indeed. So I was just lying in my bed when I was 16 and I was thinking, oh, I can just say Dutch sentences and English sentences. Wow, how's that possible? My experience then, I did not grow up bilingually as a child, but I did have exposure to different languages from an early age. First of all, different kinds of Dutch. So Dutch is spoken in Belgium, in Antwerp, where I grew up at first. I mean, where I grew up in my first 3 years, and then Dutch as spoken in the Netherlands because my family lived in Karachi for 3.5 years. And there I went to a Dutch school, meaning a school from the Netherlands, where the people spoke with a very Dutch accent, which was quite different from how my parents spoke. And then in my house, I heard people speak Urdu. And I heard people speak English, but nobody spoke English or Urdu to me. I just heard it
Yeah.
regularly. And then we went back to Belgium when I was like 6.5. And there it was basically just, uh, yeah, just Dutch
Mhm.
as spoken around Antwerp. And then I started learning French as a foreign language, but I didn't really pick up much French. And English, well, I was allowed to watch Zorro for once 1 hour a week. That was in English, and I really loved the actor. And and that was with Dutch subtitles. So, and there would be people coming to my house visiting my father, business people who spoke English.
Hmm.
And I would just sit there and I would also learn to say, how'd you do? When somebody asks you, how'd you do? That you have to respond in the same, with the same sentence, which I found was very strange.
It is very.
Anyway, nobody really spoke English to me, but I heard some English. And yeah, I listened to English music. And when I was 14, I started having English as a foreign language at school, but I already knew everything. And I was reading English books. My father had given me a couple of books to read in English, even though I didn't really know any English, but I just went ahead and just read. So I kind of, how did I pick up English? I have no idea. But TV probably did help with subtitles to learn to understand at least. Yes. So that's it basically. Well, of course, I also knew or understood some German,
Hmm.
and I had a quadrilingual German. I had a quadrilingual manual for learning to play the a guitar, and I did read aloud every every day for a year. When I was 16, I read aloud all the blocks of the languages in that book. So, and I was monitoring how I sounded.
Hmm.
I didn't have to think of the words or the sentence structure, so I could just focus on how it sounded,
And the pronunciation.
just to get my. And I think that I attribute my ability to quickly switch between different kinds of accents to a lot to that practice, basically. Yeah. Anyway.
So maybe the advice in the future would be read guitar book manuals that are bilingual. So you had this kind of early bilingual experience, but when did you actually connect that to, or this experience with many different languages? When did you actually connect that to, hey, this is what I want to spend my time thinking about?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, I was really interested in it, but okay, I started to study what was called Germanic philology in Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
And in my second year, well, my first year was at the University of Antwerp. My second year, I moved for 1 year to the Free University of Brussels. And there I took a course on sociolinguistics,
Mm-hmm.
which was taught by Hugo Batens-Beerdsmoor, who later on became my PhD advisor. But that's when I found out that there was, in fact, a scholarly discipline in which people studied bilingualism. I
Mm.
did not know that. I did not know that. I thought, oh, wow, that's amazing. And then I went back to the University of Antwerp, where I studied general and English linguistics. And during that time, I met a young child
Mhm.
who was bilingual. And
Mm.
how did I meet her? Well, I can't say much about it, but I did meet her and I started babysitting her.
Ah,
And she spoke two languages. She spoke Dutch and English at the level of course, a two-year old.
mhm.
And that's when I figured, oh, well, to understand bilingualism, you have to start at the beginning.
Yeah.
You have to figure out how did this come about in a more or less complex system, the child system. Well, there's less complexity in the language use of children than adults. I think everybody will agree with that.
Yeah.
And so that's how come I did. And also, I thought, well, I might as well take this opportunity and start recording this child,
Hmm.
which I did. And then with, of course, the help of the parents. And then I also started recording several other children. So I looked for other children.
Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
Um, well, I had taken one class in child language acquisition at the University of Antwerp, so I had some idea that, yeah, well, we're recording
Hmm.
children, right, and how they spoke and
Hmm.
everything. So, and luckily then later, um, when I was studying with Eve Clark at Stanford University,
Hmm.
I learned a lot more about child language research. But by then I had already transcribed my material.
Hmm.
And I've not quite analyzed it, but already knew and had read up on a lot of stuff, literature on early bilingual acquisition, which then I worked on for my dissertation. And at that time, I'm speaking of the early 1980s,
Hmm.
I am pretty sure that I read 95% of what there was in Dutch, French, English, and German, and maybe also a little bit in Spanish and Catalan, um, to any research that there had been
Hmm.
on that topic. Yeah, I pretty much read everything I could really. Yeah.
I imagine, in the 1980s, that was actually possible, probably.
It was possible, which is, of course, now absolutely not. And when I was writing my book, the textbook Bilingual First Language Acquisition, which I wrote in 2008 and came out in 2009.
Hmm.
So that was another occasion where I really had to bring together a lot of material.
Hmm.
No, no longer possible. And you had to be really selective, and you had the choice to be really selective.
Hmm.
And the good thing was that not only was there a lot of bad stuff, as there had been before, but there was a lot of good stuff. So a lot of good, meaning methodologically sound studies. Yes, there
Hmm.
was a huge increase. Um, Starting, I would say, in about 96, 97,
Hmm.
that's when it really blossomed and grew, that field, which was extremely small when I was working on my PhD. And I think at that time, it was basically myself, Jürgen Meisel in Germany, and Fred Genesee in Canada, who were working on similar questions
Yeah.
about the acquisition of two languages from birth on the morphosyntactic level. So stuff has really blossomed since then. Absolutely.
Thinking back to those early times when you began to study
Yeah.
child bilingualism, there were many misconceptions. I think these misconceptions still prevail today, but I think that we have a lot better evidence that we can rely on. So, for example, the idea that languages are just an unorganized jumble in the child's mind. We know that this is far from the case. Um, and like I said, we have evidence for you for this, but what do you think is the most convincing evidence, right? So you hop into an elevator and somebody says, "Ugh, bilingualism researcher? Isn't that just a jumble of things in the mind?" What's your go-to argument for this poor person that you are trapped with in an elevator?
Well, you're quite right. There's still a lot of myths about how bilingual children develop language. Um, And fortunately, yes, now we do have empirical evidence that can speak to those ideas.
Mm.
Uh, but anyway, even though I'm a psycholinguist, I'm not sure we can say anything really about what goes on in a child's mind.
Mm.
But if you think, as many people do, that a child is confused
Mm.
because they sometimes say utterances with words from two languages in them, then you are attributing something to children that doesn't make any sense if you take the trouble to look more closely at when and why they are using such mixed utterances, which children do, but the proportion of those utterances is very, very small generally.
Mhm.
Yeah, you really have to go and look very carefully to find such
Mm.
utterances. Um, Even though a lot of people will say, "Oh, that's not true." Well, if you then also look at all the other utterances that are not mixed, and you really start counting, then you will find that in most of the corpora, no, children, if they speak two languages, they speak most of the time they have utterances in one language
Hmm.
and utterances in another language, and then there are also these mixed utterances. So when children do use mixed utterances, so with words from both languages, there are various reasons for it. First of all, it depends on who they're talking to.
Mm.
Mostly they will not do that when they're speaking to a person who only understands one language.
Mm. Hmm.
As is the same case for adults. Adult bilinguals also use these mixed utterances.
Yeah.
Maybe some people would say they're confused. Well, it's just a sociolinguistic thing to be
Mm.
using those kinds of utterances. And for children, often a reason can be that they know the word for something they want to discuss only in one language, and they don't know yet the word, or they don't know the word yet in the other language. Now, look, this happens to me too when I'm speaking to somebody, but to somebody who's bilingual only.
Yeah.
Sometimes I cannot momentarily, I don't find the word in the correct language, in the language I'm speaking with that person. If that person is bilingual, I'll just allow it to
Yeah.
be said in the other language that I know the person will understand. If they're not bilingual, I will make a real effort and try to find that word.
Mm.
Yes. Or I will give some definition with and asking, oh, what's that word again?
Yeah.
Something like that. Is that confusion? No, it's pragmatics, basically. So that's what I would basically say to people.
And now it's time to step out on our floor. And we're getting out of the elevator. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
um, so you've had, as I kind of highlighted in the beginning, you've had you've worked in many different places, many different continents even. And you started out as a linguist, and you retired as a professor in a linguistics department. If one just observed it at that level, it might seem like a very, linear progression. But along the road, you earned your high school teaching certificate. You worked in a division of communication. Later, it was a department inside the University of Antwerp's Faculty of Political and Social Sciences, so more sociology kind of things. I think that maybe speaks a little bit more to what you were just talking about with sociolinguistics. So, you were just saying, research on bilingual children, bloomed maybe in the last, okay, what is the late 90s? How long ago was that?
Three
Uh,
decades, I would say.
a few decades ago. So I'm curious, as you've moved to these different places and as the field has progressed, how do you feel your work has changed over your career?
Although I've been aware of socio-psychological aspects of bilingual family life from very early on, I
Mhm.
was really looking at things from a basically purely um, morphosyntactic,
Mhm.
linguistic perspective, although I did look at language choice, so that's
Mhm.
more sociolinguistic or pragmatic. I
Mhm.
did from early on. Um, and then, after my PhD, and I was pretty much fed up with working on bilingual acquisition.
Okay.
But then Paul Fletcher and Brian McWhinney, who later would be IASCL presidents, they
Mm.
were putting together the Handbook of Child Language, and they asked me for a chapter on it. So, of course, I couldn't say no. So that was nice. So it drew me in again for a little bit, let's say. Through contacts of my sisters, I got in touch with us then the main, let's say, the main leader of that faculty of political and social sciences at the University of Antwerp, where I was working in this communication division. And he was a sociologist, Erik van Hove, and I want to mention him because I want to recognize him and
Mhm.
acknowledge his importance for my career and for my work.
Mhm.
Uh, he was, as a sociologist, while they were doing a lot of work about poverty in Antwerp, and he had been thinking about the role of language in this.
Mhm.
because there's a lot of dialect being used in
Mhm.
Antwerp, and the city dialect, the very heavy city dialect, which correlates with social class in quite a, not completely, but to to a great degree, at least at that time.
Yeah.
We're talking the early 90s.
Mhm.
Things have changed since then, I think. Um, but anyway, so I got to thinking about that. And of course, as a linguist, I was able to think of differences between dialect and standard language use.
Mhm.
So he suggested that I write a proposal for the National Science Foundation to become a postdoc. I got the contract to become
Mhm.
a postdoc, and I worked on that quite a bit. So that was all about Dutch child language, and I focused on children in lower middle class and middle class families. I did um, and I was interested, yes, in what is the effect of children's language use on people, because that's important as to what's going to happen with them later.
Mhm.
And actually, in the United States, Mabel Rice had done some work on attitudes towards child
Mhm.
language. But, I found that out a little later. But anyway, that's what I decided to do, is basically an attitude study as kind of a measure of evaluation, a measure of how well are kids doing. And for that, I'm also very grateful to have had the methodological help from my friend and colleague, Wolfgang Welk, who was at the University of Buffalo in New York, but he was a big attitude specialist. So he taught me the ropes about what to do, because I'd never done a formal attitude study, which
Yeah.
and I did do that, and it's quite incredible. I'm still astounded actually by some of the findings, or our road towards the findings of, that there really are ideas within a community about children in this particular case. There really are ideas that are very, very fixed for the people in that community. And they're very clear ideas also about how language relates to all that.
Yeah.
So that was very exciting. But at the same time, I also again got, so this was not really about bilingualism,
Mhm.
unless you're thinking about dialect and standard, but these kids were basically
Monolingual.
monolingual dialect speakers. But anyway, that got me really interested also in these language environments of the children. So I documented their language environment at home and in the preschools. And for this, I had the big help of all of students in sociology and political science and communication. And this is really important because eventually those students, well, they always had to do a research project. And I was supposed to also guide their research project, but I was the one deciding on what the topic was going to be.
Mm.
So I could use them, as everybody else did in the faculty, could use the students as research assistants.
Yeah.
So this was really a great opportunity. And I was also, at the time, I was also an adjunct at the University of Ghent in the speech and language communication department, where I was teaching future speech therapists. And there I was also advising students there, master's students there. I was meeting up with teachers who were telling me, wow, there's so many children, they don't know any Dutch, what's going on? We
Oh.
don't know what to do. And in Belgium, it's not allowed to have a census, a language census, as it is in the United States, for
Mhm.
instance, not allowed for political reasons.
Mhm.
But I was curious, like, what is this? Am I just hearing this, randomly, and it's just like here and there, or
Mhm.
is that a thing? We really didn't know at that time. I'm talking about the early 90s,
Wow.
what the incidence was of yeah, non-Dutch language use at home.
Yeah.
So I decided, through the students in Ghent and the students at the University of Antwerp, to find out about it. I didn't have any funding for this.
Oh.
Uh, no, that would have been at that time completely impossible in Belgium, I believe, to have gotten
Oh, because of the
extra
regulation.
funding for that
Yeah.
because of political reasons,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And but my then chair of department at the University of Antwerp said, "Ah, this is a good idea, okay, we'll pay for the envelopes and the photocopying and the
Oh.
postage. But of course, I had my free research assistants,
Hmm.
and so was able to set up a huge survey,
Ah.
um, um, documenting the home language use of about 75,000 individuals in about 18,000, a little more, families all across Flanders. And of course, we tried to make sure that it was fairly representative in terms of, yeah, where we sent our materials. So that was quite something, and yeah, and that I didn't publish that much about it, but I did publish, my main article about it was from 2007.
Hmm.
I was able to not only had I learned about the incidence of bilingualism in Flanders, which was quite high at the time and probably is a lot higher now,
Hmm.
but I was able to compare what the parents were doing with what the children were doing.
Uh,
And that was then the article about the importance of parental input patterns
mhm.
for children's home language use of a language that they were hearing at home, but not at school. And then I was approached by Mark Bornstein from NIH to to carry out a big project, a longitudinal project in Belgium on bilingual children and bilingual families. And I did, I added some stuff that was important for the bilinguals as well.
Mhm.
And I think before we even started, I insisted that we would ask not only the mothers about children's language development through the CDI, MacArthur
Yeah.
Developmental Inventories, which we were using um, pre-published versions of in
Mhm.
Dutch and French,
Mhm.
but that we would also ask the fathers, and if there was anybody else who could offer us information, that we would do that. So a couple of papers came out of that and showed quite clearly that, yes, obviously, even also for monolingual children, because this study compared bilingual children and monolingual children, even for monolingual children, of course, you learn a lot more about what kids are doing on the language level if you ask two people rather than just one person. Of course, the norms are still based pretty
Mhm.
much everywhere on one person,
Yeah.
but we're probably underestimating what children are doing. Yeah, but in a bilingual setting, this is very important, especially if you have a one person, one language setup
Mhm.
where the one parent doesn't really interact with the child in the other language. So how are they supposed to know anything about what they're doing? You
Yeah.
know, just by overhearing occasionally? It's not, so that's, it's really important though to have in these evaluations, which are kinds of an assessment, if you like,
Yeah.
to use methodology that is absolutely fair to the people you're dealing with. And all too often, that is still such a problem in the field.
Mm.
And with a focus on just one language for the bilinguals, no, that is absolutely wrong. You have to look at the whole thing. You
Yeah.
do not, for monolingual children, you don't only look at what they're doing on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday,
Yeah.
but maybe you're also interested in what they're doing for the rest of the week. Well, it's the same thing with the bilinguals. You have to look at it holistically. What are they doing, especially if you're going to compare with monolinguals?
Yeah.
Hey, you got to be very, very careful
Mhm.
in your methods to be fair and not discriminatory.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So I just to kind of maybe summarize that a little bit, I found it very interesting to hear from you all of the different so as I started out this question, right, you started out as a linguist, you retired as a linguist, but you had so many different directions that you went during your career. And I think that that happened um in a combination of luck, as it always happens, but also in a combination of working hard, networking, and being in communication with people and taking opportunities when they come. And I appreciate hearing that story because it shows that even somebody who I would consider to be very successful, right? Um, your career was, not as straightforward
Oh no,
as one would think.
no. No, I didn't get tenure. I mean, it took a long, long, long time for me to get tenure. So I'm very happy and
Mm,
very grateful to the University of Erfurt
yes.
and those who hired me, and I, was a top rank professor there. And in a linguistics department, I was very, very, very happy, and I happily taught Introduction to Linguistics. I happily taught that. It was very nice for me. Yes.
So, as I mentioned in my introduction, you were the initiator of HaBilNet and serve as its director. Tell us a little bit more about HaBilNet. What kind of work do you do?
Okay, well, that's a lot. I do a lot of work there. um, well, I'm the director. Basically, I make sure that every word on the website and every idea that's expressed there, that it's okay.
Mm.
Even though many of the ideas or blog articles we have, they're not mine,
Hmm.
but they are vetted and edited, and I edit all the texts and all the translations and everything.
Hmm.
And I've also written a lot of the blog articles, and I do all the finances. So we used to have a large budget. We're nearing the end of our budget, sadly,
Hmm.
but so we were able to give grants to quite a lot of researchers.
Hmm.
We've also we gave also one doctoral grant, and that person got her PhD in the meantime.
Oh,
But we're also at this moment, we're still funding another PhD student in Canada.
okay.
And yeah, so we've partnered with universities, so more research outfits and more outreach outfits. So
Hmm.
we're trying to straddle research and outreach, and
Hmm.
we're trying to focus on indeed well-being in bilinguals.
Okay.
So on outreach activities that promote well-being in bilinguals, and research activities that focus on examining and investigating factors supporting well-being in bilinguals. That's basically it. We've organized two colloquia, and the third one is in the process of being organized.
Hmm.
It will take place in San Sebastian this June. Okay, I realize that people will be watching this video maybe in other years. Anyway, we're now 2025,
Yeah.
so that will be our third and unfortunately last colloquium
Hmm.
because of our budget problems. I mean,
Oh,
problems, it's normal.
yeah.
We've done a lot. We give, so basically, I organized that colloquium
Hmm.
with help on the content level from our advisory board member, Lourdes Ortega,
Hmm.
who's at Georgetown University
Hmm.
in the United States. So the website, well, I designed the website and filled it, of course, with the help of our dear webmaster. And luckily, I have a team member who helps me with the day-to-day stuff, who posts things online. I don't do that myself, that I don't, but I'm really responsible for the content.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah. And we also importantly, we have a consultation service.
Ah.
So parents can request a consultation for free.
Hmm.
So we have a team of consultants who
Hmm.
we pay, of
Hmm.
course, but parents don't have to pay. So we've done, I think by now, I think we've had about 200 consultations with
Wow.
people worldwide.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, this is something that I've been doing
Hmm.
for decades, but so this is really more yeah, more structured, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
We've also then written a blog article about what are the three main questions that people ask, and
Hmm.
what are our responses, what have our responses been.
Hmm.
So that's all. Well, go take a look at habilnet.org and find out. And of course, we're also active in social media. We've published lots and tons of videos on our YouTube channel and on our Vimeo channel. Our Vimeo channel has mainly interviews with bilingualism scholars,
Hmm.
incomplete, but there's too much to do. So maybe when I next retire, my next retirement, maybe I'll be able to handle all that because that's the thing, it's me who instigates things and then I get help from people, but basically it's all up to me, really. Yes.
Okay.
So, but it's been quite a ride. Yeah.
Yeah. And the nice thing is that those kinds of things will live on. Even if
Yeah.
HaBilNet kind of, you know,
Yes.
slows down a little bit, those things we have forever. And that's a great contribution.
Well, the website, forever is a big word because you cannot reserve a website or a domain forever. That's not possible, but we're going to do our best to keep it for a long time.
Excellent.
Yes.
As we've established, I think earlier in this conversation, much of your research has been focused on empirical observations, parent-based reports of children,
Yeah.
especially here focusing on those who are hearing two languages at home. So in most cases, one finds that these children grow up to successfully speak both of these languages, but in some much fortunately, much more rare cases, children only speak kind of the majority language or the language that they're hearing at school, but not necessarily a language that they're only hearing at home. Which can definitely cause frustrations, both on the side of the caregivers and the children. I think maybe this is the kind of thing that you guys are doing in consultations, maybe something that's often
Yes.
addressed.
Yeah.
Um, so in the past, you've told of a story, kind of a collective group of caregivers, in this particular case, a group of Russian-speaking mothers, who were attending one of your talks at the University of Haifa in Israel. And these mothers, these Russian-speaking mothers, have been told to only speak Hebrew with their children, a language that they actually didn't know. Therein lies a frustration. I think that's something that I say very often is I really genuinely believe caregivers want the best from their children. So when they get instruction like that, they feel they have to follow it, even though it's how can you speak a language with your child if you don't actually speak that language? So they were really relieved to hear your message. They should speak the language that they feel most comfortable in. And I think this is a wonderful story. I'm sure you have many like that, but this is just one
Mhm.
example.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering um, whether you've experienced pushback or people who were kind of critical of this idea of, hey, speak the language that you're most comfortable in, right? So I'm curious what you would say to somebody who would argue, well, these children are growing up in Israel, so they should learn Hebrew. So what would you say to a person who would who
Well, of course, I would agree with those people. Of course, they have to, if they live in Israel, they have to learn Hebrew. And if they live in Germany, they have to learn German. If they live in the United States, they have to learn whatever language is being spoken in their area.
yeah.
That is normal, but this is the whole thing that why limit yourself to one language?
Mm,
You don't have to limit yourself to one language. And these children learn the language of wherever they're going to school.
yeah.
In fact, in a big review study that I've done, a review study of surveys from around the world,
Hmm.
I have found that children who are growing up with another language than the language that's being used in school, and maybe also the school language at home,
Hmm.
that 20 to 25% of these children, they do not speak the language, the non-school language. So
Mm,
children always learn the school language. You don't have to worry about that.
yeah.
It might take, with some children who are only starting to learn the school language at age 3, 4,
Hmm.
it might take a little longer. Well, yeah, they need some time to learn. We all need time to learn. But what's really important is that within the family, people should be able to communicate with each other. And parents have such an important role in supporting their children in all walks, in all the things that matter in life. Yes, and if they cannot communicate with their children, this is tragic. It's not just frustrating, it is tragic. It's
Mm,
tragic for the parents and it's tragic for the children. Parents must be able to use whatever means are available to them to communicate in a good and competent fashion with their children.
mm,
And that does not stand in the way of learning another language. It's not, our heads, well, it looks like a box, but it is not a box. It's not that, I got to put something in there. Oh, something else has to come out.
yeah,
No, it does not work that way. But a lot of people have that box idea about language, and
yeah.
it doesn't work that way, thank goodness.
Yeah, that's the exciting thing, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so convincing argument. So I think we've been highlighting this a little bit in the interview. You've done many impactful things throughout your career at many different levels of academic scholarship, writing along with Lourdes Ortega, the Cambridge Handbook of Bilingualism, the influential textbooks Bilingual First Language Acquisition and An Introduction to Bilingual Development. The study that you mentioned previously in Flanders, which incredibly sampled over 18,000 families. I think you said 75,000 individuals. About 25% of them were bilingually
No,
reared children.
oh,
Speaking.
yeah, but the adults, the 75,000, that includes the adults, of course.
Okay. Yes. The founding of HaBilNet, and of course, your work with IASCL, which we'll get to a little bit later. So I'm curious, what has been your driving force in your work? What would you like to be remembered for?
Well, one basic driving force in my work has been, which I started really investigating in the early 90s already, with a chapter that unfortunately came out way too late, namely in 99,
Mm,
but it was written in 95, um, about how come that so many children who are being raised with two languages from early on, they speak just one language. That was really something that really drove me for a very long time, and it still
mm,
is. And because also I realized at that time already the bad impact of that on families,
yeah.
the hurt, the pain, the
Mm,
depressive symptoms on
mm,
within families. So that includes the parents, very importantly.
yeah.
Yes. So that's been a driving force. Um, Also, actually, the reason why I started with the Harmonious Bilingualism Network.
Okay.
So I want to be, I think it's really important. If I can be remembered for wanting to focus on people's well-being, on the people that we study as people, that we recognize that they are people. They're not just producers of sounds or of sentences. They are people. And I have constantly attempted through my writings and my talks and manuscript and project reviews, comments at conferences, mentoring of younger scholars to focus really primarily on the well-being of the people we study and avoid discrimination. That's very
Mm,
important in the study of bilingualism.
mm,
And on another level, well, in my work, I've always tried to think very carefully about methodology
mm,
and to take into account the reality of bilingual lives. And that in my methodology, there is not even an implicit bias against bilingual people. And so, if I can be remembered for those aspects, I will be very pleased.
Well, I think that you will definitely be remembered for those. I think about, yeah, in terms of methodology, thinking about the environment, what you were saying before, maybe when we're asking, caregivers to comment on children's language, we ask more than one caregiver because the children are not spending all of their time with just one caregiver. In some situations, a majority of the time. But the more data that we can get from the more people who are interacting with children, the more knowledge we can gain. Yeah. Yeah, being very careful about that. Yeah. Okay, so as I promised, let's switch gears and talk about IASCL. This is, after all, an IASCL interview. So I mentioned in the introduction, you first became a member in 1987. So can you tell us about your first encounter with IASCL and maybe how your involvement has changed over time?
Oh, well, I went to the first IASCL conference because that's basically what IASCL is really about. Its main goal is to organize triannual conferences, right? Because, yes. So actually, I didn't know about IASCL, but I had met um, Paul Fletcher and Mike Garman and of course, I can see his face before me. Oh my gosh, David Crystal,
Ah.
excuse me. And David Crystal, I had met them in England when I did a tour of England
Mhm.
to talk to people about my dissertation to get some feedback on my ideas. And that's when Paul Fletcher mentioned this IASCL thing and the conference that was going to come in Lund. And I thought, oh, yeah, I should go. So I went and gave a talk, and Paul Fletcher was so kind as to be there.
Mhm.
And later on, he became a member of my PhD committee.
Ah.
And this was a fantastic conference. It was so friendly, and it was so
Mm.
amazing to meet all these people that I had read, whose work I had read, and I was still pre-PhD then,
Mm.
so it was really quite amazing. And and then, of course, I got the bulletin, which at the time was the Child Language Bulletin, was sent out on paper to
Mm.
people. And, I was very interested. In fact, I have read every Child Language Bulletin since early 1988. Yes.
Wow.
Um, yes, I was really interested in this. I thought this is a great outfit. It is. It
Yeah,
still is.
it still is.
But I did go to pretty much every IASCL conference I attended and
Yeah,
spoke at. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
definitely. Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes. It was always so wonderful to, yeah, to meet up again with the colleagues.
It really is. I always think about, good conferences like this as kind of a summer camp, right? You get to go and hang out with people you really like and do things and talk about things that you really enjoy.
Yes,
Um,
that's right.
so
Yeah.
you in the most recent issue of the bulletin. This is volume 45, issue 1, the one that was just published a few months ago. You reflected on your presidency, which you ended at the Congress in Prague last summer, 2024. So, in your letter in the most recent issue of the bulletin, you mentioned setting a goal of having the younger generation know IASCL. Um, so I think, it seems like it played an important role for you as a young scholar. So why was this such an important goal for you in your presidency?
Well, unfortunately, I found out, well, the pandemic didn't do us any good, right?
Mm, true.
We had an online conference. So there was not really that opportunity for community building,
Mm,
seeing each other again, really chatting and talking about projects offline.
mm,
So we didn't have that. So I think we needed a little bit of a reboot,
yeah,
sort of. After all, our conferences are only every 3 years, so that's not
mm,
very often,
yeah.
right? And to re and then I found out from a few people, young scholars who had already published in on child language, they did not know the IASCL. I thought that that was very sad for
Yeah,
them,
yeah.
basically. So I wanted to avoid that. And this is one reason that I really thought we should have a very important, we should have I mean, we had some digital uh,
Mhm.
presence, but it wasn't really, we were not on social media. We did not have our own website. So I thought that was really important to change that and to have that and to give this boost and this, yeah, to make ourselves known
Yeah.
to people all over the world, really.
Yeah.
This is very important. We are international. As far as I know, we are the only international association that is focused on children's language use. So, and of course, my own personal experience was with the IASCL over the years have been very, very positive. And yeah, very important to feel part of a group because let's face it, people who study child language, they are in a niche field, really. The people who study child language at a linguistics department, well, um, there may be just one of them
Yeah.
in a psychology department, same thing. So
Yeah.
often it's very lonely work.
Yeah.
So let's give people some community, I mean, it's really important
Yeah.
that they meet and talk to each other and find each other.
Perhaps related to this mindset that you had during your presidency, a new
Yeah.
award, the IASCL Early Career Award, was established to honor more junior exceptional child language scholars. And the first recipient, Dr. Wena Garcia, gave a plenary talk at the 2024 Congress in Prague titled Casting a
Yeah.
Wider Linguistic Net, Language Acquisition Insights from an Austronesian Language. Um, this is something that I ask all of my interviewees. What advice do you have for early career members of IASCL?
Okay. I think the one thing that you want to do is follow your own passion,
Mm,
not your advisor's passion.
mm,
It's all the better if those go in the same direction. But you're not there for your advisor, you're there for yourself. And if you cannot have the passion to take a very deep interest in one particular topic, to really dive into, well, it's just not going to work. So you
mm,
need this passion, but it has to come from you.
mm,
So I think that's very important in terms of the research.
mhm,
Uh, yeah, but also maybe think of the potential larger meaning of what it is that you're doing.
mm,
Yes, you may be working in a very, very minute um, world with just a few experiments here and there. I mean, I know how difficult it is to carry out good experiments,
yeah.
but I think occasionally you really have to ask yourself, what does this really contribute, what I'm doing in the bigger
Mm,
frame of things? So sometimes step back from what it is you're doing and just reflect on it and try to see the bigger picture.
mhm,
And then maybe you'd be going into a slightly different direction,
mm,
perhaps.
mhm,
Yeah. Right. I mean, personally, I've gone in very many different directions. I couldn't tell you which is D1. I
mhm,
don't think there is a D1, but what I have done is I've approached a basic problem from very many
mm.
different angles.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody's going to want to do that or is going to be able to do that, but, have a bit of a reflective thing about what is the larger meaning of what you're studying or could be studying. That's about the content of your research. And in terms of academic service, what happens when you're early career, and especially when you're a very successful early career scholar,
Mhm,
you're going to be asked to do all kinds of jobs, reviewing,
mm,
uh, being a journal editor, being or assistant editor, being a book editor, etc. All these jobs that are not necessarily for you,
mm,
and you will be very flattered to be asked. But think of the work involved and be realistic in what it is that you think you can do.
mm.
And of course, we all need reviewers, we all need editors. I mean, that's our world, right?
Yeah.
But really discuss it with some friendly academics before you make a decision and really reflect on it before and know what's in it for you, knowing that at the same time you will be putting in a lot of hours and there will be unexpected problems and so on and so forth. This always happens in any job, right? Um, but yes, I think Make sure you don't take on too much.
Yeah. So if I could summarize that, be passionate,
Yes.
um, look at the bigger picture, and
Yeah.
protect your time.
Yes, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The IASCL actually turned 50 during your presidency. Most
Yeah.
members probably don't realize uh, it, but you've put in an incredible amount of work documenting the early days of the founding of our association, which is now written down on our website. You can find this on our
Wow.
website. To maybe honor all of the hard work that you put into this, maybe tell us a little bit more about this process.
Okay. Yeah. Well, actually, just my predecessor, Ginny Gathercole,
Hmm.
in 2019, in June 2019, she'd already started trying to put together this table
Mm.
of our history, like who was president and vice president and conference organizers and child language bulletin editor and so forth. But that wasn't our history really. So I wanted to know more about it. I mean, I realized that it would be our 50th at some point. That I don't remember what was the trigger for that. But anyway, then I got in touch with several people, lots of past presidents,
Hmm.
and also Dan Slobin about yeah, things they could tell me. And I went and yeah, went and looked online to try and find sources about what was going on. Yeah, how did this all happen?
Who was
How
talking to who and where were they?
Yes.
Yeah.
And how did we as an organization become? How did
Yeah.
we become an organization? Yeah. And when and how did that happen? And I even spent a lot of money paying for the proceedings of the 1970 Pedolinguistics Colloquium. Yes, I am just astounded at how much money De Gruyter wants for that. But anyway, it was very interesting to read it because I did, and that's my advantage that I read several languages because there were I couldn't read the Czech in there, but it was very interesting to read through that. Yes, because we are all part of a tradition, right? Each and every one of us, each and every IASCL member is part of a scientific tradition that is not new. Sometimes young people think, yes, it is, everything is new because they're newly learning about it. But the actual ideas, many of them have been thought
Mm.
before. And it's important to realize that. And it's important to know that you are really continuing this thread, this tradition of child language studies. Of course, it's expanded, and we now have so many more methodological tools, instruments that didn't exist before. Eye tracking, I mean, of course not. Very new, fairly new things. So, that was very exciting for me, but yes, it was a lot of work, but I very much enjoyed it because I'm really a historian at heart. Had I not become a linguist, I might have become a historian. That's what I decided a few years ago.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I'm glad you became a linguist. And yeah, I really like thinking about documenting the history as thinking about the scientific tradition that we come from. I think that that's really important. All right. Last question, maybe a little bit more lighthearted. You are now retired. Although earlier in the in the interview you mentioned having a second retirement, because it seems like you've been doing a lot of things since you retired from the University of Erfurt. So I'm curious, how do you spend time at this stage? What have you been up to, and what has changed?
Okay. Yeah, well, what has changed is my attitude is
Mm.
I don't have to do anything anymore. I've been retired for 4 years now. It's now March 25.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, I've done a lot more, HaBilNet takes up a lot of my time. and
Hmm.
effort. Um, but what I typically don't do anymore is work after 8 p.m.
Hmm.
And I don't feel guilty about it. That's the thing. That is very different. The attitude is different. Weekends, well, actually, I tend to work more on weekends because then I have fewer emails to deal with. So I'm still very active and I'm very grateful to be scientifically and academically active.
Hmm.
I really am very grateful for that. I think that's a wonderful opportunity for us in our job. I know that, in the United States, the United Kingdom, things are different. People don't have to retire necessarily. The United
Hmm.
Kingdom, yes, when you're 70 or so, I think,
Hmm.
but not in the United States.
Hmm.
Um, well, in Europe, it's different. There is mandatory retirement.
Hmm.
So I'm very grateful that it's possible to do that. The thing is, I'm more or less under contract to write a book.
Oh.
I have been working on it, but I'm already 2 years late.
Oh.
So that's to let you know that there's so much else that gets in the way. So that has not really changed
Oh.
in comparison to, well, that's not true. It's actually worse than before. Yeah, yeah, maybe it's because I no longer work 70 or 60 hours a week. I don't do that anymore.
Mm.
And I take time off. I frequently take time off. And my favorite pastime is to go to good classical music concerts. Not only
Mm.
classical music, but mainly. So
Mhm.
I will take trips to
Mhm.
go to particular concerts where I really love the program or the performers.
Mhm.
So I'll go to Paris. I'll go to Berlin. I went in January. I went to Malta for a festival of Baroque music.
Mhm.
That's great. So that is fantastic. That is absolutely a big change. I was not able to do that before.
Mm.
I knew about these concerts, but I couldn't go because I had to teach or I had meetings or blah, blah, blah. So this is for me is fantastic.
Mm.
And also, yeah, working in my garden, well, actually, I have less time to work in my garden than before, it
Oh
seems.
no.
Yeah, but I guess it's between concerts and my garden, I guess I choose the concerts. Yeah. So, yeah, no, I'm super happy with the feeling of just being able to do what I decide. Where, of course, before I had a lot of freedom too, as
Mhm.
many of us have in
Yeah.
academia. But of course, it was different. It was different, and yeah, I can, I'm not unhappy to not have to go to the meetings, faculty meetings. I'm not unhappy about that.
Mm.
No, I decided to not do any manuscript reviewing anymore. I have edited or co-edited another volume for a journal, but that's not the same. So, I should probably, yeah. Anyway, it's about the manuscript. At least those kinds of things you control yourself, whereas manuscript reviews, they come in and well, you say yes or no, but I mean, if you're really still reviewing, well, then you review.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't anymore. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
But
haven't done. And that makes a big difference.
yeah, so retirement for you sounds like choosing the things you want to do and choosing to not do the things you don't want to do.
There we go.
Yeah, and I enjoy hearing about your travels, and I also enjoy talking to you about your garden because we
Oh
also
yeah.
that's
Thank you
always
very much.
um,
Yes,
that's
yes,
always
yes.
a
Now,
fun.
now is the time. The time is now coming.
Yes. Uh,
Tomorrow I'll be picking up some plants to
oh,
to plant. Yes, yes, yes,
very
yes.
exciting. Yes, we've been in ours weeding as well. So.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're
It
so
was
very
I
welcome.
spend a lot of time with you regularly talking about media coordinator things, but it was really enjoyable to get to know your career and your thoughts on your career and also on the different areas that you've done research in. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I very much appreciate it. It's a lot of fun.